Well, it started this way. 19th century European immigrants brought with them to America their Christmas customs, including gift-giving, caroling, trees, and St. Nicholas. St. Nicholas was a Christian bishop born around the year 280 in around Turkey, Lycia, in Asia Minor. He was the patron saint of seafarers and children. And he was known for his generosity, so St. Nicholas is said to have dressed in disguise and distributed presents to the poor, especially the children. Now, the whole thing about Santa Claus and the reindeer are traveling over the world, it actually goes back to the Scandinavian god Woden, who was Thor's father, and he would traverse the skies with his horse, granting boons to people. So that evolved, and it became St. Nicholas, who traversed the skies with reindeer. So when the Dutch came to New Amsterdam, now in New York, they brought their St. Nicholas with him. They called him Sinterklaas. Sinterklaas. And on his feast day, December 6th, they carried a statue of the saint in processions down the main street. So by the beginning of the 19th century, around 1800s, the St. Nicholas Day celebration had merged with Christmas, largely due to the efforts of a group of aristocratic New Yorkers known as the Knickerbockers. And Washington Irving's book, Knickerbocker's History of New York, mentioned the saint 25 times. This was the first publication to make literary mention of St. Nicholas in this country. So in December of 1822, Clement Moore read his children a Christmas poem he had written called A Visit from St. Nicholas. And in it he referred to Santa Claus as St. Nick, and is a short, round, jolly man with a long white beard. That's how his image has remained to this day. And then Coca-Cola ran an ad and insisted that his suit be Coca-Cola red. So, isn't that interesting? Yeah. See, we think that things have always been, and they haven't. You know, these traditions evolve, these sacred things. And so some people get upset that, Santa Claus is not traditional. It's nothing about the birth of Jesus. But, you know, all of our holidays are a melding of the pagan celebrations of the people before they were converted to Christianity and the Christian ones. I mean, really, what have eggs and Easter bunnies got to do with the resurrection? You know, so we combine them. I don't think they had Tannenbaums in the Holy Land, but this has been a combination that we do with our celebration. So the greatest gift of all, besides the awareness of the Christ consciousness within, I think is this time of year where we really do wonderful giving. I mean, we reach into our hearts and wallets and we give to those in need. We give thoughtful gifts to people we love, not just because it's their birthday, but what they might really enjoy. And I think that it brings out the best of us. You know, Jesus taught us that what you do to the least of my brethren, you do also to me. And so when we give gifts to those in need, we are really drawing upon the Christ consciousness within. So I wanted to share just a heartwarming little story about a little boy who was dealing with this thing about figuring out Santa Claus. So he says, I remember my first Christmas adventure with Grandma. I was just a kid, and I remember tearing across town on my bike to visit her. On the way, my big sister dropped the bomb. There is no Santa Claus, she jeered. Even dummies know that. My grandma was not the gushy kind, never had been, so I fled to her that day because I knew she would be straight with me. I knew Grandma always told the truth, and I knew that the truth always went down a whole lot easier when swallowed with one of her world-famous cinnamon buns. And I knew they were world-famous because Grandma said so. Grandma was home, and the buns were still warm, and between bites, I told her everything. She was ready for me. She said, no, Santa Claus. She snorted, ridiculous. I don't believe it. The rumor has been going around for years, and it makes me mad, plain mad. Now put on your coat. Let's go. Go where, Grandma, I asked. I hadn't even finished my second world-famous cinnamon bun. Where turned out to be Kirby's General Store, the one store in town that had a little bit of just about everything. And as we walked through its doors, Grandma handed me $10. That was a bundle in those days. Take this money, she said, and buy something for someone who needs it, and I'll wait for you in the car. Then she turned away and walked out of Kirby's. I was only 8 years old, and I'd often gone shopping with my mother, but I had never shopped for anything and paid for it all by myself. The store seemed really big and crowded, full of people scrambling to finish their Christmas shopping. But for a few moments, I stood there confused, clutching that $10 bill, wondering what to buy, on who on earth to buy it for. I thought of everybody I knew, my family, my friends, my neighbors, the kids at school, the people who went to my church. And I was just about out of thought when I suddenly thought of Bobby Decker. He was a kid with bad breath and messy hair and sat right behind me in Mrs. Pollock's third grade class. Bobby Decker didn't have a coat. I knew that because he never went out to recess in the winter. His mother always wrote a note telling the teacher that he had a cough, but we kids knew he didn't have a coat. I fingered the $10 bill with growing excitement. I would buy Bobby Decker a coat. I settled on a red corduroy one that had a hood and looked really warm, and he'd like that. Is this a Christmas present for someone? The lady behind the counter kindly asked as I laid my $10 down. Yes, ma'am, I said, it's for Bobby. The nice lady smiled at me as I told her about how Bobby really needed a good winter coat. I didn't get any change, but she put the coat in a bag and smiled and wished me Merry Christmas. That evening, Grandma helped me wrap the coat. A little tag fell out of the coat, and Grandma tucked it in her Bible in Christmas paper and ribbons and wrote to Bobby from Santa Claus on it. This is for the coat. Grandma said that Santa always insisted on secrecy. Then she drove me over to Bobby Decker's house, explaining as we went that I was now and forevermore officially one of Santa's helpers. Grandma parked down the street from Bobby's house, and she and I crept noiselessly and hid in the bushes by his front walk. Then Grandma gave me a nudge. All right, Santa Claus, she whispered, get going. I took a breath, dashed for his front door, threw the present down on his step, pounded his door, and flew back to safety in the bushes with Grandma. Together, we waited breathlessly in the darkness for the front door to open, and finally it did, and there stood Bobby. 50 years haven't dimmed the thrill of those moments spent shivering beside my grandma in Bobby Decker's bushes. That night, I realized that those awful rumors about Santa Claus were just what Grandma said they were. Ridiculous. Santa was alive and well, and we were on his team. I still have the Bible with the coat tag tucked inside. 1995. Isn't that sweet? And that's the greatest gift of Christmas, that kind of giving, that kind of spirit. And I wish you all a very Merry Christmas of your own. And I'd like to invite my husband, Reverend Bob, to continue. Thank you.